busted NYC Chinese police station is only one among at least 7 in U.S. Run out of time, China's war machine is ready for Taiwan invasion. Seagate ordered to pay $300 million penalty for selling hard drives to China's Huawei. Chinese companies can exploit loopholes and export slave-made products to the U.S. Expert. Chinese regime buys influence through building parliaments in Africa.
The shuttered Chinese police outpost in Manhattan might not be the end of the chapter for the FBI, as there might be 6 other ones lurking across the U.S. Madrid-based human rights group Safeguard Defenders told the New York Post on April 19 that the covert Chinese operation has another facility in the Big Apple. Outside of that, there is one in Los Angeles, one in San Francisco, one in Houston, and 2 others in cities in Nebraska and Minnesota. One spokeswoman for the NGO's group said they detected at least 4 Chinese police stations in the U.S. that the United Front Work Department operates. This Chinese government agency handles ethnic and religious affairs outside China. The addresses are not disclosed. However, a statement from the Department of Justice on April 17th revealed that the Manhattan Center already ceased operations last year after learning of a federal inquiry against it. The clandestine police stations enable the Chinese Communist Party to export its oppression campaigns against dissidents and Falun Gong practitioners, a religious movement that originated in China but later faced widespread persecution from the CCP. The New York Post reported that on April 14th, Brooklyn Federal Court charged 46 individuals in 3 separate complaints for crimes related to China's efforts to suppress dissent in the U.S. Prosecutors said that over 30 of them belonged to a Chinese police task force that functioned as a troll farm from Beijing and spread Chinese state propaganda online to harass dissidents. Globally, Safeguard Defenders estimated last December that China has established police outposts in more than 100 countries. At least 5 governments have verified that some of these are illegal Chinese government operations that break laws against foreign police activities in their territories. Probes into other centers are underway in countries like the UK, Japan, and the Netherlands, but no person linked to those facilities has been arrested. President Biden's top commander for the Indo-Pacific region has warned that the U.S. and its allies are running out of time to confront China's unstoppable war machine. Citing a candid assessment by Admiral John Aquilino, The Times reported on April 19 that the China threat is escalating, including China's fast-expanding navy, the dispersion of hundreds of silos being built to store nuclear-armed ballistic missiles, and the doubling of 5th-generation stealth fighter production. According to Aquilino, the head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Indo-PACOM, said that Xi Jinping is in charge of the largest, fastest, and most comprehensive military buildup since the Second World War in both the conventional and strategic nuclear domains. This week, he told the House of Representatives Armed Services Committee, conflict in the Indo-PACOM area of operations is neither imminent nor inevitable. Nevertheless, we do not have the luxury of time. We must act now to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force has continued to massively expand its arsenal of conventional and nuclear missiles, which Aquilino described as the most stunning of all the advancements when considering the larger threat facing the entire Indo-Pacific region. Aquilino added that in China's growing arsenal, there are almost certainly many hypersonic missiles, some of which might be nuclear capable. The building of silo fields throughout northern China, together with contemporary ballistic missile submarines and the nuclear-capable air-to-air refueling bomber known as the Xi'an H-69, highlights China's commitment to creating a survivable nuclear triad. According to current estimates, the Chinese military will likely possess at least 1,000 deliverable nuclear warheads by the end of the decade, he claimed, adding that the authorities in Beijing were being secretive about the scale of its nuclear force expansion. He said this larger arsenal could provide the PRC with new options before and during a crisis or conflict to leverage nuclear weapons for coercive purposes, including military provocations against U.S. allies and partners in the region. Speaking about China's expanding military, he said that 17 new warships, including 5 frigates, 4 guided missile cruisers, 3 destroyers, 2 attack submarines, and a sizable amphibious assault ship were added to the fleet last year. He projected that the 350 battle force ships that make up the People's Liberation Army Navy will grow to 440 by 2030. Aircraft carriers, submarines, surface combatants, amphibious assault ships, combat logistics boats, and various support ships are considered battle force ships. Comparatively, the number of battle force ships would rise from 292 currently to a maximum of 367 by 2052 under current U.S. Navy shipbuilding plans. American forces still have far more carriers than China's, 11 compared with Beijing's 2 in service and 1 new generation carrier launched last year, but China could have 5 by 2030. Beijing has set 2027 as the deadline for the PLA to deliver the capabilities needed to counter the U.S. military in the Indo-Pacific and project power across the globe. The PLA has increased manufacturing of the 5th generation J-20 Mighty Dragon stealth fighter with an estimated 150 of them now operational as part of the effort to achieve its deadline. Additionally, China conducted 64 successful space launches in 2017 that successfully launched more than 160 satellites into orbit, enhancing its capacity for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. In contrast, there will be 55 space launches in 2021. Based on the assessment of a classified U.S. military, Washington Post reported on April 18 that the Chinese military might soon employ a high-altitude spy drone that travels at least 3 times the speed of sound. This development will significantly increase China's ability to carry out surveillance operations.
Seagate Technology Holdings plc, the world's biggest producer of computer hard drives, has agreed to pay a $300 million civil penalty in a settlement with U.S. authorities. The company's move is to resolve alleged violations of U.S. export control laws when it sold millions of hard disk drives, or HDDs, worth over $1.1 billion to China's Huawei. The Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security, or BIS, announced the deal on April 19th, making it the largest standalone settlement in its history. The U.S. placed Huawei on the Entity List, a U.S. trade blacklist, in 2019 for national security threats, banning American companies from doing business with the Chinese tech firm without government authorization. However, the Bureau said that Seagate continued to do so when selling over 7.4 million hard disk units to Huawei without getting government approval. Seagate's action thus violated the Foreign Direct Product Rule, which imposed controls over certain foreign-produced items related to Huawei. In a statement, Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement Matthew S. Axelrod said that, even after Huawei was placed on the Entity List for conduct inimical to our national security, and its competitors had stopped selling to them due to our Foreign Direct Product Rule, Seagate continued sending hard disk drives to Huawei. Today's action is the consequence. The settlement includes a mandatory multi-year audit requirement and a 5-year suspended denial order. The BIS said Seagate repeatedly authorized extending lines of credit to Huawei, totaling more than $1 billion between January and September 2021, resulting in an increasing volume of HDD exports to Huawei that the entity was otherwise unable to obtain. Bloomberg reported that Seagate would pay the penalty in quarterly installments of $15 million over 5 years, starting from October.
Chinese companies can exploit loopholes and export slave-made products to the U.S. Expert: Chinese fast fashion companies may have used a legal loophole to export slave-made products to the U.S., products that violate the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Anasuya Sham is a Human Rights and Trade Policy Director for the Human Trafficking Legal Center. Before the Congressional Executive Commission on China on April 19, Sham said that de minimis shipments refer to goods imported into the United States and exempt from certain taxes and duties because their value falls below a certain threshold. She added, currently, the de minimis threshold for the U.S. is $800. Chinese companies such as Shein firmly grasp the threshold and will export to the U.S. de minimis shipments that cost less than $800. Many of them are produced by Uyghur workers enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party regime. Sham said a strategy for circumventing enforcement of the UFLPA might be to break up a shipment that is clearly subject to all reporting requirements into multiple de minimis packages, and companies are doing just that. She said these are typically direct-to-consumer shipments that receive almost no customs scrutiny or inspection. According to Breitbart, since at least 2017, the CCP has detained around 3 million Muslims in concentration camps. Lucky survivors say that in the concentration camps, they faced communist indoctrination, brutal torture, gang rape, and slavery. A strange phenomenon has occurred in several African countries over the past few years. Despite the extreme poverty that many suffer, they have proudly presented new parliamentary buildings and large-scale governmental buildings valued at millions of dollars in the last decade. Who is behind such significant investments of money? The answer could not be other than the Chinese Communist regime, which seems to be another facet of the neo-colonialism it carries out worldwide. Africa's largest trading partner, China, has developed multi-billion-dollar infrastructure projects from the Belt and Road Initiative. The main works carried out under this pretext were railroads and port terminals, but the regime's penetration has advanced to such an extent in the African continent that they are now also constructing parliamentary buildings and other governmental works linked to the most intimate of national sovereignties. These buildings, such as Zimbabwe's recently inaugurated $200 million parliament, are generally given as gifts without loans attached. Of course, one wonders why such generosity is on the part of the regime. Constructing such buildings is relatively inexpensive for China compared to the benefits it can receive from improving its relations with governments often singled out for high corruption rates. In addition to these, there are dozens of other government buildings. In all cases, the Chinese regime and its associated construction companies control the entire process, from design, execution, management, and completion. This mechanism used by the regime to build influence allows it, among other things, to become involved in the country's internal politics. Beijing, after these gifts, has the door of these parliaments open, and there it not only has access to dialogue with the governments in power, but also with the opposition factions with whom it also establishes relations. This is very valuable for the regime, especially in countries with frequent alternations of power due to political and economic crises. In this way, the regime can establish and deepen long-term relations in the various countries, not only with the government in power. It can guarantee permanent access to natural resources and other interests in the country. This covert purchase of loyalty to China explains why most African countries do not join the Western critics who denounce the abuses of the communist regime against Uyghur minorities or practitioners of other spiritual disciplines such as Falun Dafa. While certain sectors of the United States are fighting alongside their allies against Beijing's increasingly aggressive international agenda, a bloc of African countries is presenting itself as a shield in defense of the Chinese Communist regime. Concern has also been repeatedly expressed that the new buildings may be equipped for possible espionage by the Chinese regime in these countries. Even certain reports highlight the installation of hidden microphones in Ethiopia's Chinese-built African Union headquarters, something Beijing has repeatedly denied. Even though the Chinese economy is no longer enjoying a surplus as it did a few years ago, the regime's drive to continue investing in institutional buildings in Africa looks set to continue. Several projects are underway or soon to begin, such as Ghana's Foreign Ministry building and the new headquarters of the West African bloc ECOWAS, currently under construction in Nigeria.